Hello, everyone. Welcome to our summit, The Shared Path, Journey Towards Fulfillment, where experts reveal the secrets to a joyful and fulfilling life through community connection and belonging. I'm Martine Occeas, and my guest today, Cas Holmes, is here to discuss how maintaining a connection with her art has helped her create a balance between her role as carer, as an artist, and carer for her partner. As an artist, Cas Holmes spent a lifetime as part of her practice working in care settings and hospitals, as well as education, and seeing the positive benefits engaging with the arts can bring. Recently, her life partner Derek had a stroke, which has meant a massive change for both of them and her life as an artist traveler. Her skills as a working artist are helping her to find the balance between her creative practice and her caring role. Through teaching and workshops, she shares these new skills with others, including well-being and mental health organizations. Cas Holmes is the author of 6 books: The Found Objects in Textile, Connected Cloth, Creating Collaborative Textile Projects, Stitch Stories, Personal Places, Spaces, and Textiles, Traces in Textile Art, Textile Landscape, Painting with Cloth in Mixed Media, Embroidering the Everyday, Found, Stitch and Paint, and Soulful Stitch, Finding Creativity in Crisis. Welcome, Cas.
Um, Thank you, Martine. You probably noticed I stood up because obviously the most recent book, Soulful Stitch, which I've co-collaborated on with artist Dina Beverly, is due out in October, and that really focuses upon maybe being a creative person in crisis or when things are against you. So it just seemed right to introduce with that. And Embroidering the Everyday was the book that kind of was released on the it's interesting. I have to say this, it was exactly 3 years today. I realized that my partner had his stroke. So it was 3 years today.
Wow,
And
wow.
my book came out that day as well. So it was released on the same day. So it's a
Yeah, so it's
quite
sort of bittersweet, right?
bittersweet, absolutely a bittersweet moment.
Yeah.
So I'm ready for the interviews.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. So, I'm just going to go ahead and get us started. So, could you walk us through your artistic journey and what early experiences or influences shaped your foundation as an artist, and what key moments or inspiration led you to develop your unique artistic style and approach?
Like trying to put a life into a few short sentences. I don't think I had a time when I didn't draw. I drew as a child. And I would think some of my key notes come from my Romany grandmother, given that space and dialogue with her. So I'd spend time visiting her. I'd sit and draw around her house and with my father, who was a sign writer and a painter and decorator. So I got used to seeing people around me doing things with their hands, but not necessarily stitches, which is where I've continued my practice. I graduated at Maidstone College of Art, which is now the University College of Creative Arts in Kent, where I now live.
Mhm.
And I studied painting and drawing to a fine arts degree course. Shortly after, I was awarded a Churchill Fellowship and a Japan Foundation Fellowship and studied in Japan, studied papermaking and textiles. And I think that perhaps was a seminal moment for me when I really made a connection between paper and cloth, that tangibly they're both made with raw materials. Within the West, paper is made, traditional paper has been made from cotton rag. Um, and in Japan, it's made from the paper mulberry or shoji, but the natural fiber is similar for both materials that I now use in my work. That interrelationship between paper and cloth has remained as part of my practice. But also, it opened up the world to me, and I've been a traveler of the world ever since that time. And um, seen many different things in my life, participated in different types of workshops and experiences as an exhibiting artist, and collaborated on projects all over the world, including the USA, Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, I had wings on my feet until very recently.
All right. So you mentioned being a traveler. So my next question is, as an artist traveler, you have had the pleasure of traveling to over 30 countries. Is that correct?
I think at least 30 countries. I tried to do that as sustainably as possible. So if I go on a long haul flight, I will line up workshops and events together. So I'll be away for several months at a time, um, and maybe only once a year. So I actually enjoy working abroad, or working, I say abroad, but working collaboratively with many different communities and people from different cultural backgrounds all over the world. I think it's a fabulous learning experience. You get to see how people live, how they manage their lives, rather like through a window though, because you are only a guest for that short period of time you're there.
Right.
But it's been a great leveler. I think anybody who has that fortune to be able to intermingle with different communities can take that experience back into their own development.
Very nice. So, I'm going to go ahead and finish the question. So, how has your global experience shaped your understanding of community and belonging? And can you share specific insights or contrasts that you've observed between different cultures?
I think one of the most powerful things is when I'm delivering a workshop as opposed to an exhibition. An exhibition, I'm normally there as a, if I'm able to attend the exhibition opening for a short period of time and meet people who are interested in my work. So, it is my work that's the meeting point, where whatever I'm doing, whether it's a workshop or an exhibition.
Hmm.
Within a workshop environment, people almost forget the world around them because they are so focused on what they're doing.
Hmm.
And you develop a new sense of community. So people could be coming from all over the county or the state, or sometimes if I've traveled to Australia or the USA, people have traveled from all over the place just to come to that workshop in the USA, and they develop a new sense of community, and as part of that they exchange information. But it's a community that's based on trust, because to be able to work creatively and share your ideas in a small or even a large group setting takes a lot of faith with each other. So it's usually an environment where people are willing to help each other out. I see where materials are shared, ideas are shared and exchanged. And you can go through a whole emotional scale as you connect to your work, because connecting to something creative, whether it's music or the visual arts or performance, takes an awful lot of your, I'd like to say it takes a little bit out of your soul, and you add a little bit into your soul each time, so that I think it develops trust within those communities. On another note, what I see is when I step outside of that workshop, and one of the biggest learning experience I had was when I was in Australia, in Tasmania. Maybe first trip to Australia was in 2010. I had I had exhaustion because I'd been traveling a long time to get there, and my workshop was in 2 days after I'd arrived, and I hit a point, I think about middle of the second afternoon, when I felt I needed to step away, because I was emotionally drained and physically drained, and actually very tired because of different time zones, the heat I wasn't accustomed to.
Hmm.
So I spoke with the convener of the workshop and explained my situation. I said, could I just take a break for now, or I'll make it up at the end of the day. But if I don't take that break now, I don't think I can continue, because it's very real. Jet lag and exhaustion is a very real thing. And I've never got to that point in my own practice before, where other things were impeding upon me being able to deliver that I had no control over.
Hmm.
And I took the break. And when I came back, the group were there and we were discussing where we move on. And she said, we've had a discussion. She said, and this is a partnership. You are the person who's taken yourself away from your natural environment and have traveled to us to deliver a workshop.
Hmm.
Our role is to enable that to happen. So there is no need for you to make up that session. You've already empowered us to do what we need to do. and you also need to take care of yourself. It's our job here, because this is our community, to make certain that you have a place to sleep, you know where the food is, and we look after you, because you're trying to do too many things at once. And that's what community is. It's about supporting you when you need it. And that was a very powerful kind of recognition for me, is that that's what happens whenever I travel, is I'm reliant on that community. You know, she put it so effectively into words. Chris, her name was. What I constantly do, I am reliant on other people when I travel to teach, that they engage with that process and they support me to enable that to happen. So it's that human nature, if the best of human nature, to enable you to do what you can. And outside of the workshop, you know, I would either be guested or hosted by the workshop conveners or some of the students. Most of the time, that would be my preference to being put in a hotel, because a hotel can be very isolating. It's different if you're on holiday with friends, but it also enables me to feel part of the community. So I would seek that kind of, if it's feasible, but I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. But that's where I feel that we can run with collaboration. It's when we feel we can do that, where we have a dialogue.
Right. And it also gives you an opportunity to experience things firsthand as a traveler through the life of others who actually live in that area.
Absolutely. Hotels have a different framework of operation. In fact, depending on the type of place you go to, if it's a network chain that's all over the world, you wouldn't know you were anywhere else in the world in chain hotels. But to actually be in a small bed and breakfast or with a host, you're not just being hosted for a place to sleep. You are invited into that world as a guest. And
Mm.
that is a great experience for me to find my way. I call it finding my way into that community, so I can more effectively meet that community in order to do what I want to be able to do with them as a teacher and an enabler.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you now describe yourself as an artist carer as opposed to artist traveler. So several years back, your partner Derek had a stroke. Can you walk us through your emotional journey following the stroke? Specifically, how did you navigate feelings of loneliness and isolation during that time of drastic change?
I can almost see that period as in three distinct stages.
Mhm,
And I would say that the first point, um, understanding that Derek is the person who's always home. He's a homebody. You know, this
mhm,
place I call home is where I come home to after I've traveled. So the realization after getting over the shock that he'd actually had a stroke and he was away from me, he wasn't in this place where I see him. He was in hospital and further isolated because it was during the 221 pandemic. So I could only go to see him for an hour every 2 to 3 days. So I wasn't able to spend time with him. So I would be home, and I was home I'd been at home as many people had during the pandemic for the last 2 years. So that was for many of us, a very disconcerting, if not strange environment, and sometimes quite terrifying. But that became in time familiar. But to be home without him here in this place was the most challenging thing I felt of anything,
mhm,
because I wasn't used to being in this house on my own. I was always here with someone, and it also felt very isolating. Although friends were incredibly supportive, and I went for a few walks, and I was able to, you know, as I said, visit him for an hour. It was still, I felt very removed from him and very removed from a life I understood. Um, so part of my coping mechanism was to turn to my creativity. I didn't perhaps do it with a idea that I was going to make anything. I just did it because I needed to keep my hands occupied. And by keeping my hands occupied, it also, I think, fed into calming my worried brain. So the very first thing I did was to hand stitch words onto a piece of old tablecloth, sections of an old tablecloth, which had a print of a garden, some stitched garden flowers onto it. And these words were my identification with the garden, which was his domain. He's the gardener, and it always is in his heart, a gardener. And I was the watcher in the garden. I'd sit and sketch. So I would stitch some of the words about the things I was finding out in the garden. So that first sense of us making connection and feeling less lonely was my stitching. The first words on came from his mouth when I realized he was able to communicate. And it was him stating when I said I could not find the garden oil, the WD-40 we call it here. I think you may have it there. And he replied to me where I could find it, which was in a cupboard just above our toilet area. And so I actually stitched down the words, I can find the WD-40 now. So I made that connection to him through stitching these words to tie me back to him. So fundamentally, I went back to my own creativity in these lonely times that I was here, and found things to do to help my brain to function and to tie me into him. But also friends were around. They would take me to the hospital because I don't drive. I have eyesight deficit. So they would take me to the hospital, and the sense of the immediate community around me rallied during those first few months.
Very nice. So, what did you need to put in place to manage your life and your new responsibilities as a carer?
When he came home, so that was really the second stage,
Hmm.
what your expectations are based on what the information you receive from the hospital and our local social services, and the realities are literally quite a distance apart. Two
Hmm.
different things. I'm certain it's the same in the USA. With recession, with a pandemic, many of our services are in crisis here. That would be the first thing. And I knew that he'd want to be home to be cared for. So we did have, for 2 to 3 months, something called an enablement team. So that immediately comes out to support you until you learn to manage yourself. So here, that's what would happen. They come from the social services 2 to 3 times a day until I learned how I could manage Derek at home, because I needed to undertake some of the responsibilities of his care that he was receiving in hospital until he improved. So it's the daily tasks. One of the most difficult and challenging things in continuing that is to create that space for me to do what I wanted to do during the day, or what I felt I needed to do. And that was to be an artist as well. In the early months, it was very hard to do anything for more than an hour a day in the evening, to do some drawing or some stitch, but I still felt I needed to do it. So for one aspect, I knew I needed to find a connection to what was important to me, because if I didn't, I couldn't keep caring for Derek. And also, whilst I take that role and responsibility as a carer as a very important part of my life now, it's not the only part of my life. And it could be very easy to immediately, it's not easy to continue my practice, but for continuing it and for also continuing my creative input, I feel better in myself as a person. I've held on to that identity. So it's so easy to lose. It can be so easy to lose your identity as being the role of in a role of a carer. And the caring system can provide the fundamentals if we needed it, possibly. I'm not saying it could, there would be enough carers to do that. If he needed help getting out of bed or in the morning, or he does need help with food, preparation of food, I would certainly pay for someone to come in to do it. But whilst I'm here, I can do that. And that helps his independence, because he can do quite a lot himself, but he needs someone around constantly. And that's the difficulty. Care is in pockets, and that often doesn't fulfill the requirements of the person who needs care. And it certainly doesn't fulfill the requirements of the person who is otherwise in a place of providing full-time care for their partner.
Okay, so you had to put stuff in place for yourself just to maintain your individuality.
Absolutely. And I think that isn't just distinct to me. I'd say that to any young mother who has a family to raise, adults with children. You have a day-to-day responsibility. So that's what I have, a day-to-day responsibility. He's not highly dependent. He doesn't, as I said, he can manage to get in the shower. Sometimes he needs help with getting clothes on. You know, these small little things during the day, which means I cannot just step out and I say London is 30 miles away from me. I cannot just get on a train and go to London for the day without having something in place. So I have a professional carer I can call upon if I need to be somewhere, who can come in for a couple of hours during the day to make certain that he's okay, if he's got anything, and to give companionship. I wouldn't feel comfortable about leaving him alone all day either, because he will need some additional support at points during the day.
Has he been able to maintain social connections?
It's much more difficult for him to maintain social connection, and it's not just, I mean, every Friday he goes out with a charity that provides me with support at the moment. That may be withdrawn at any moment, because again, there aren't enough charities or support out there to provide support for those who are in my position, or anybody else who's in a position that they need care or support medically. There just simply isn't enough to go round. So once a week he goes out and have a coffee with her, and that's really important for him as well, to have his independence. Occasionally we'll go for coffee with a friend. We can mobilize him into a car, but it's also to do with his mindset. He needs to have much stronger and clearly defined parameters now because of the stroke. He needs to know he can go to a place where there are certain facilities available, and he can walk for a short period of time only with a stick. So he needs a stick. So some of the restrictions of where he can go is limited about his security and his feeling of safety being outside of places he's familiar with.
Okay. So why is connecting to other people so important to your work and creativity, as well as your well-being?
I think connection is important to everybody. Whether, we're connecting via Zoom at the moment, and a lot of my life has been restricted to this connection via the screen, and I learned to do that during the pandemic, so that was a useful tool to have. It would never be my first choice of doing a workshop, but as a second choice, it gives me access when I'm working from home to connecting to people, and to those people who perhaps, I have people attending my workshops who are in the same position as Derek, but getting outside of the home. They might be frail, they might be social, they might be distanced because geography might limit them being able to get to a workshop. The means to do it, they might not have access to a car, might be too far for them to travel. So it's about recognizing there are many different tools to connection that enable us to have human contact. And whether it's through a screen or whether it's in a workshop, it's about testing myself and also being able to share and exchange information. That's fundamental, isn't it, to human beings. Seeking that place where you can discuss openly your uncertainties or explore different ways of tackling a problem, whether it's a creative problem or whether it's a learning goal that you have. We learn better when we connect to other people. I'm not talking just about academic learning. I'm actually talking about learning about ourselves, developing ourselves. As human beings, I feel we have an innate need, most of us, to connect, to be with other people. So I cannot, as a creative being, deny that creativity and that enablement to share for other people. no more than I can in myself. And for me, that's been a very important part of my own practice. That kind of care, create and cultivate cycle, I call it, that we, by caring for each other, by creating together, we can cultivate ourselves, our well-being, our sense of who we are. And I think visual arts, music are very much part of who we are.
Yeah, I like that. So, what difficulties do you still continue to face with this situation, navigating all of this?
Freedom. I took it for granted. That's the one word. Somebody did a portrait of me recently. I posted it online. My brain is not functioning. That's another thing. When you become a carer, you find that the pockets of your brain are divided so often. So occasionally, it doesn't. You can't communicate as effectively, and you have to struggle. I think that's normal part of aging, to be quite frank, as well, Martine. So you're going down that road. You'll have to pull that information.
I think I'm already there.
But that of me looking through a window, I had a photograph of me looking through a window, and I feel that for the last 5 years, my life has been about that barrier often dropping in place, whether it's the tangible barrier of the screen or the physical barrier of not just being able to step out of my front door and go when I wanted to go, knowing Derek was perfectly safe. But I don't think that's unique to me. I actually think a lot of people are still living, even if they don't have the same physical restrictions on that life, with that uncertainty or that being slightly frightened of what to expect now. I think young children have lacked that communication and connection with each other in early learning years, so that their learning has been hit quite badly by the pandemic, because they haven't been able to share in the community setting with other children. So I feel that for me, there's kind of like a slight veil with that ability to be able to separate myself from being in an alone space to a space where I'm joining with others. And it's always there. So that's what I mean. That veil is preventing me having what I had once was a great freedom in my life. And maybe I took that for granted. I certainly don't now.
Okay. So, drawing from your personal experience, what advice would you offer someone facing a life-altering event? And how can they preserve their sense of identity and stay connected to their community?
That's really a hard question to answer, because I can only speak from my point of view. One of the first things I did when I was able to is communicate to people that my professional practice, I needed to do that anyway. So because I had a professional practice, I needed to communicate with people to say that certain events that we had planned may either need to alter or be cancelled because of that. And by doing that, I opened up communication. And I continue to be honest about that. And I think that's the most important thing you can do. Share. You don't need to overshare, but actually share some of the things that are perhaps you feel interfering or enabling you to be able to meet up or communicate or be with that person, and find other strategies for doing that. So that would be the first thing, to be honest about your situation, because I think many people don't talk about that. It's as though we're frightened to talk about the difficulties we face, whether it's something that makes it difficult for you because of your own physical or mental well-being, or whether it's because you are in a position of caring for someone else, or again, geography or family caring. Be honest. That's the first thing. Be as honest as you can about what those difficulties are, because we all have them to a certain or greater degree. And then that opens up a pathway for people to then meet you and discuss with you if they really want to be involved with your life, where to go, what we can do together. So that would be the first thing. I used the word acceptance once, and I think there is an acceptance in me about that my life has changed. That was hard. It doesn't mean I didn't swear a lot and get angry, except that anger is part of it. I get angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not certain there's another word that I can use for replacing acceptance, because I think my continuing practice is me, it's not about denial, it's about an acknowledgement that the me has to happen as well in order to me to meet with the you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that, and I still want to be able to give. I've got some useful tools to give, you know, and I want to be a member of that community, because being part of a community places value on me as a person as well. So again, it's about how can I still offer you something of my particular skill set through these difficulties that also enable you to move forward. So it's about finding different ways, different strategies of moving forward. They'll be very complex and varied, but sometimes that way we can meet up. I mean, I can't be with you in the USA. It wouldn't be, aside from the fact of the fact that I geographically, it'd be very expensive, and my own limitations. But I can be there to have this discussion.
Yeah.
So it's about finding different strategies. I know that sometimes when I went to college, I found that completely, the first month, very disconcerting to be away from the familiar things. That is probably the most challenging time of a young person's life, to be away from friendship groups and where they are. But that's part of a growing up experience, and you'll go through many of those changes through your life. But there will be people that you'll carry along with you who might remain lifelong or long-term friends, and those will change as you go through life. And I think it's about keep putting those tentacles out there and wrapping yourself around a few people to bring them close.
Mm-hmm.
And then also accepting there may be a few people that you no longer remain connected to for various reasons. They may have their own thing going on, or it may be they're no longer good for you, and there's an acknowledgement of that as well. So that would be my things. Try to remain in communication, value what's good for you in your life, what you need to go forward, but
Mm-hmm.
always strive to find a means to connect, even if it's for half an hour a day, because not to do that, I recognise the times I found it more difficult, and that's each time Derek's gone through crisis where I've needed to provide him with more care. That's when I lost myself as well.
Okay. Wow, that was beautiful. So do you have any parting words, perhaps anything that we did not cover within the interview that you would still like to communicate?
Yeah, the need to do things other than what you normally do. So if you're an academic, and that was passed on from my sixth form. Sixth form is further education here in the UK. That when we did our exam subjects, we were encouraged to do something else in school that we're not doing an exam in, just for the sheer fun of it. And I think that's the important thing. Find something that you do that isn't to do with work or your regular leisure activity, if you like,
Mhm.
just for the sheer fun of it.
So
So find
indulging.
that time during the day. So there might be something during the day that you do. It could be that, I mean, tomorrow I'm going to meet up with a buddy in London because I have somebody coming in the afternoon,
Mhm.
because now I need that more. When I was working and out there all the time, I was involved with people all the time. So I didn't have the time or the ability to make a day trip to London regular. Now when I can find that time, I buy that time because it's important. So find the time to do something that you really want to do. If it's to see a show, don't say, oh well, maybe I can't do it this time. Find the time to do something that fills your soul. That's one thing.
Mhm.
Find the little bits of things that give you joy every day. So for me, sitting on the bench in the garden in the summer with a proper cup of coffee that I've made on the stove is just that little me time I have during the day where I don't do any creative work. I might read a book, but just to sit and stare. So just find those little moments of joy.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. How can people find you, Cass?
Just Google me, but I have a website, casholmes.co.uk.
Mhm.
I'm on Instagram under Cas Holmes Textiles and on Facebook under Cas Holmes Textiles. And I will be, if anybody's in London, near London, in the 10th to the 13th of October, I'm guest artist at the Knitting and Stitching show with an exhibition called The Shipping Forecast. I'll be there every afternoon because I'm travelling up daily from where I live in Kent. But if you come along, I'll be happy to say hello. So I'm getting out there, and that's a very specific case of connecting to other people, and be very grateful for the team at the Knitting and Stitching shows who have altered the way they work in order to enable this to happen.
Okay, very good. And you'll also be sharing two links with the audience that we can put on the site and as part of the video. Can you give us some insight about what those links are?
I can share you a link, which was an interview with Natalie Banang, and at the moment I usually have, as Martine knows, a piece of work behind me, but I've just taken it down and packed it up, ready to be packaged off for exhibition. But this video by Natalie Banang is a look behind the scenes at the studio and a conversation about a particular piece of work called Memory that talked about my understanding of what was happening both to Derek in terms of his memory and his memory loss, how I connected to other people through our joint memories of things that had happened in our lives, in a piece of work, what we remembered about learning as a child and what he was going through as a child. And that came out into a piece of work. So this will give you much more background, if you like, to how an artist has used loss and absence as a means to create a visual piece of work.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those links. And I thank you so much for doing this and for giving us your time. I really do appreciate it. I think that's about it. That's all that I have.
Yeah, and thank you. I can only speak from the heart. I'm not academically trained, so you know that's the way to connect. Speak from your heart. Thank you for inviting me, Martine, and I hope if anybody's enjoyed this, please let us know.
Oh, for sure.